My name is JD. I'm going to be presenting to you Fun with Replacement Effects. This is going to be easy because this is our last one, but my card is bright green. Okay, who's ready to have some fun with replacement effects? Yeah! Woo! That's exactly the spirit I want to hear. And I'm JD. Howdy. Okay. First, I want to talk about identifying replacement effects. There's a lot of confusion as to what counts as a replacement effect, what doesn't. There are some basic guidelines here. If something says skip, that's a replacement effect, such as Eon Hub. Players skip their own upkeep steps. The skip instruction is saying replace your upkeep with nothing. That makes it pretty simple, huh? Okay, instead is a big indicator that you have a replacement effect, such as in Angel's Grace. Until end of turn, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. That is a replacement effect. As this enters the battlefield, such as Voice of All, as it enters the battlefield, choose a color. That is a replacement effect. It modifies the event of entering the battlefield with the modified event of choose a color as it enters the battlefield. And entering the battlefield with something or tapped, that's also a replacement effect, such as on Blood Crypt, our fantastic little shock lands. You get a replacement effect of choosing to pay 2 life or not, and that modifies how it enters the battlefield. There are a few other types of replacement effects, though, such as regeneration. Regeneration, it doesn't really say any of those words on the card itself. All of that's actually in the rules. If you read the comprehensive rules, it says that if something would be destroyed, if it's being regenerated, instead you untap it, or you tap it, you remove it from combat, and remove all damage on it. Such as the fantastic Crypt Sliver, because I love slivers, because slivers are amazing. Okay, regeneration is a little bit tricky. Crypt Sliver says all slivers have tap to regenerate target sliver. Let's say I have another sliver out, such as Bone Scythe Sliver. Bone Scythe Sliver is going to want to attack, but I want to protect it. So I'm going to tap my Crypt Sliver to regenerate the Bone Scythe Sliver. However, it can't regenerate right now because there is no destruction effect being applied to it. So what happens is I tap my Crypt Sliver, and my Bone Scythe Sliver gets a little regeneration shield on it that will apply next time it would be destroyed. Now, if my Bone Scythe Sliver attacks into, say, a 2/2 first strike creature, I give my Bone Scythe Sliver trample, so he goes to my 2/2, my 2/2 blocks it, and he has that regeneration shield. The 2 creatures will destroy each other. However, even if he has trample, he still won't do any more damage because, like I said earlier, part of the regeneration replacement effect is to untap or to tap it and remove it from combat, so it won't do any more damage after that. Before I go on, I would like to let you know that this topic can be a little bit tricky, sometimes a little bit confusing. So if you do have any questions at any point, do speak up, ask me. I'm here to help you learn this as best you can, okay? Okay, did anyone have any questions about regeneration? Awesome. Yes?
Is regeneration an event done by the tapping of that sliver, or is it something that will happen the next time the sliver?
That is an excellent question. So the question is the act of regenerating it creating that shield, or that shield being used up? And the answer is that the act of actually regenerating is the act of that shield being used up to replace that destroy effect. Hey, we also have self-replacement effects. Like on the card Fatal Push. It has a general effect that destroys a creature if it has a converted mana cost 2 or less, but it has a self-replacement effect where we can tell it's a replacement effect because it uses the word instead. So if this condition is met, it replaces its own text with this new ability. Redirection is another kind of replacement effect. This is mostly found on some of the older cards that can redirect damage being dealt. One important thing to note with damage redirection is that when the damage is redirected, that damage contains all the qualities it once had. For example, if a creature with Infect were attacking and you redirected the damage to a creature instead of to a player, that damage that's redirected still has Infect and will still put the -1/-1 counter on that creature. Sound good, guys? Are you having fun yet? The damage itself does not actually have color. The source of the damage does retain the color, and yes, the source of the damage is still the original thing dealing that damage. Correct. The damage is the damage is still coming from a red source.
Basically, the way I think about it is the source is still doing the damage to something else.
Correct. Yeah, that's an excellent way to think about it. With redirection, you can think about it as the source is actually dealing the damage to something else instead. Okay, those are our basic types of replacement effects. So, now let's have some audience participation. Who's good at shuffling cards? You in the back with a hat. Come here, I need some help shuffling my cards. Okay. Here. Shuffle my cards for me.
All right, man, you got it. There you go.
Remember, you can only pile shuffle once.
Oh, got it. Yes, is this sufficiently pile shuffled?
Yes. Okay. When you have multiple replacement effects trying to replace the same event, sometimes you have to figure out which order they go in. So let's have a demonstration. I'm going to need a second volunteer. You're already standing up? Okay. Read to us your card.
Essence of the Wild, 3 generic and 3 green. Creature avatar. Creatures you control enter the battlefield as a copy of Essence of the Wild.
Excellent. Show it to our viewers at home. Okay, give it more. Read your card.
It will immediately die.
Gather specimens. If a creature would enter the battlefield under an opponent's control this turn, it enters the battlefield under your control instead.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, let's say that this player has an Essence of the Wild out, and he wants to play a Bear Cub. This player casts his little instant in response to this player casting his Bear Cub. So, we have 2 replacement effects. One saying it's coming into play under his control. One saying, hey, it's going to turn into a copy of the Essence of the Wild. So, which one is applied first? Which does it become an Essence of the Wild and then come under his control? Or does it come under his control and then not become an Essence of the Wild because he doesn't control it? They do not hit the stack in active player, non-active player order. Caitlin.
Copy control. So it will enter and then not become
That is exactly correct. There is an order to replacement effects. First thing that happens, always, is that self-replacement effects apply. Like on Fatal Push, if it changes what itself does based on some pre-existing condition, that happens first. Second, control effects. So that would be like gather specimens. Gather specimens. For this situation, yes. This is going to be the only one that actually affects the control. So, you're going to be first. So, move yourself over there. Okay, so first we're going to apply gather specimens. So he gets the bear cub. Second would have been Essence of the Wild, but this no longer has anything to replace, so he just gets the bear cub.
Or if the opponent controls the essence of the wild, then it would in fact become a
Correct. Okay. I know this may be a little bit confusing. Does anyone have any questions yet? Yes. Okay, the question is, why would you want a bear cub? And the answer is that because the mama bear is always nearby. Okay. The question was, what if the other guy cast gather specimens? Okay. After these three things, it comes down to the affected player or the controller of the affected object choosing which replacement effect happens next. Now, there is built in the rules the answer to this other question of what if a replacement effect is affecting both players? Which one chooses at this juncture? And the answer to that is that then goes into AppNap order. So, you can go ahead and put your cards down, but do stay up here.
We inch that way then, so I'm not right.
Yes. And here are the cards that mine were supposed to look like.
This one's pretty accurate.
Thank you. Especially that stick figure in the background, right?
You know what? I enjoy your cards better. Yeah. I enjoy Essence of the Wild not having power cups. It's an abstract interpretation. I'm having fun.
Okay. Now, like I mentioned earlier, redirection effects, those are replacement effects. That includes the Planeswalker redirection rule, which basically means that if you would be dealing damage to a player, you can choose to redirect that to their Planeswalker. Yes, non-combat damage. That is a good distinction. Thank you. Combat damage you assign when you're actually assigning your attackers. Okay. So, let's say we have two more cards out. One, a Gideon of the Trials.
That's what it should be.
Two, a Furnace of Wrath. Now, the Furnace of Wrath is an enchantment that says if a source would deal damage to a creature or player, it deals double that damage to that creature or player instead. Gideon of the Trials is just a Planeswalker, basically, with some stuff. Okay, let's say player casts Lightning Bolt, and Furnace of Wrath is out, and they have a Gideon of the Trials. They say, hey, I want to redirect my Lightning Bolt to your Gideon of the Trials. we have two replacement effects now. One is redirecting the damage from the player to the planeswalker, and the other one is doubling the damage dealt to any player or creature. Which order of these replacement effects apply? The planeswalker redirection or the Furnace of Wrath? The answer is the affected player chooses. This is not the control effect, this is not the copy effect, and this is not a self-replacement effect. So other than those three, the order goes to the affected player or the owner of the affected or controller of the affected object. So, what's that? The Lightning Bolt owner does not choose. It's the controller of the Gideon of the Trials that chooses. So, he can order it this way so that it'll be redirected to the Gideon. However, if that happens, Furnace of Wrath cannot replace it because damage isn't being dealt to a player or a creature anymore. As long as Gideon's not a creature. I should have thought about that. Bad example. Bad JD. Okay. Yes.
Whoa.
Emrakul's banned
That's reaching. That's reaching.
Okay, if you're controlling, the question is, what if you're controlling your opponent's turn? In that case, your opponent still gets to make that decision. However, you are the one making that decision that they're making for them. Correct. Now, switch cards or places.
No, this is going to be much easier. There we go.
Okay, you can alternately. Question.
I was just curious why the lightning bolt wouldn't count as a source of being affected by the Furnace of Wrath.
Okay, the question is why would the lightning bolt not be affected by the Furnace of Wrath once it's targeting the Gideon? And that's because Furnace of Wrath specifically says that it has to be a player or a creature being dealt the damage, and Gideon in this circumstance is a planeswalker.
I mean, I get that, but like when you're targeting, you just target a player first with it. Right then, the Furnace of Wrath wouldn't double it before redirecting it.
Okay, the Furnace of Wrath doesn't double the damage until the damage is actually going to be dealt.
So once you decide where it's going to get.
Correct.
I think what you're asking now is whoever's going to be affected by the effect, not who controls the source. So the lightning bolt's going to deal damage to the Gideon or to the creature.
Yes, the lightning bolt's going to deal damage to the person of the Gideon, depending on the choice. Well, it's always going to be directed to the Gideon, actually. Okay, so now let's say this order. Furnace of Wrath first. So this replacement effect, we have the damage going to the person, and it will double that damage. And then you have the Planeswalker redirection replacement effect applying after that. Then it's going to double the damage, going to deal 6 damage, and that's going to, all 6 damage is going to go to the Gideon instead of just the 3. So the way you as the player who is either the player being damaged or the controller of the affected object, the way you order the replacement effects can affect the outcome. And there are some outcomes that may be more desirable to you as a player, but outcomes are all the same to us as the judges as long as they're legal. There are very often times where a player will say, okay, my Gideon takes 6, and they have the option of it not taking 6. However, what they said is a perfectly legal outcome, and there's no reason to step in on that. Do we have any questions?
I was going to add on your, like, that being a perfectly legal outcome. Another tricky thing is players who have a better knowledge of the rules will sometimes be like, okay, you're getting it, take 6. And if the player who is making that choice doesn't say, no, it doesn't, or doesn't contradict that, that's okay too. That's agreement, and that's them making a decision.
That is true. What she said basically is that sometimes if a player has a little bit more rules knowledge and they say, okay, your Gideon takes 6, and the other one says, okay, yes, Gideon takes 6. That agreement is acknowledging that this is how you're ordering those effects.
As long as that person isn't lying and saying, I mean, if there's any question about it, he can't say, no, it has to take 6. That's how the rules work.
Correct. If they say your Gideon has to take 6, then that is misrepresenting the rules, which is definitely an infraction. Okay, thank you guys so much for your help today. Give them a round of applause. Okay. And this was just that example. Pew! Okay. There is something very important to note, that a replacement effect is not generating its own effect when it changes things. It is modifying something that's already there. To illustrate this, I'm going to actually use an example that came up in our South Central Judge Slack recently. Anointed procession. Yay, anointed procession. Okay. Anointed procession says that if an effect would create one or more tokens under your control, it creates that or twice that many tokens instead. Now, an effect is generated from like an ability or a spell. Something that is notable is that special actions are not effects, like playing a land, morphing a creature, or state-based actions, like something dying from lethal damage. That is also not an effect. We have Kalitas, Trader of Get. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead, it's a replacement effect as well. Exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. Now, if you have both of these cards out, whether or not you get the double number of tokens depends exactly on how that creature was destroyed. For example, if it dies to lethal damage, like I said, state-based actions, not an effect. Not an effect, so this replacement effect does not apply to it. Have I lost anyone? Okay. Is everyone sure that they're good on this? Awesome. The important thing here is that this replacement effect is actually changing what is happening. So instead of saying, if it's a state-based action, instead of saying, with lethal damage, you move it to the graveyard, the state-based action now reads, move it to the graveyard and do any replacement effect that would apply, such as moving it to exile. Okay. Yes?
So what would be considered effects?
Okay, an effect is like terminate. The question is, what would be an effect that would trigger, or not trigger, that would activate that replacement effect from the anointed procession? That would be a destroy effect like terminate, any instant or sorcery that says destroy, things like that. Question?
I think something that we decided in Slack that made this less complex was also the fact that so replacement effects have the word effect in them, which makes you feel like they should be an effect. If you think of replacement effects as event modifiers instead of an effect, it gets a little bit less confusing because then you're not trying to reconcile the word effect.
That's a fantastic point. If you think about a replacement effect as an event modifier, oh, never mind, the word effect is there. Then that really does help lessen the confusion on that. I had a question back here.
What about sacrifice? Would that meet the criteria?
Yes, sacrificing is an effect. Yeah, if it's paying a cost, then that is not an effect. But if it is causing them to sacrifice as part of the resolution, then that's an effect. Yes, effects are the result of spells and abilities resolving.
Also, damage like lightning bolt, would that create?
Okay, lightning bolt. Okay, that's a great question. If you have the lightning bolt, you bolt the creature. You have both the Kalitas and the anointed procession on the field. The way this works is the lightning bolt resolves, deals the 3 damage. The creature now has 3 damage marked onto it, and then would die to state-based actions. So the lightning bolt is different than a card that would say destroy target creature. Not if they won't get screwed if they hear my presentation. Okay. Okay. You have in Magic we have a lot of enters the battlefield replacement effects. This one gets really tricky, so I saved it closer toward the end. When you're deciding what replacement effect will apply, you count what that creature would be on the battlefield without taking into consideration continuous effects from other sources. That sounds complicated, but this is an easy illustrative example. Have Blood Moon on the field. You go to cast Blood Crypt. Sorry. You go to play Blood Crypt as a special action. Okay. So, on the battlefield, this would be a mountain. However, as I said, when determining what replacement effects will apply as it enters the battlefield, you do not take into account continuous effects from other sources, such as Blood Moon. So, with Blood Crypt, it still has that replacement effect, where it says you get to either pay 2 life and have it untapped, or not pay the life and have it tapped. Question?
I'm not sure if this is the best example. It says non-basic lands are mountains. Isn't that a land card before it's on the battlefield? Before it's on the battlefield.
If Blood Crypt had the text non-basic lands or mountains, then it would apply to itself. Because the game looks to see what the card looks like if it was on the battlefield right now, only looking at continuous effects.
I see.
Correct. So Blood Crypt, it will be affected by the Blood Moon. However, it's still going to have that choice where you can pay 2 life and have an untapped mountain, or not pay the life and have a tapped mountain.
So if Blood Crypt is in the graveyard and Blood Moon is on the battlefield, then Blood Crypt is just a mountain.
Can I have that question one more time?
If Blood Crypt is in the graveyard and Blood Moon is on the battlefield, Blood Crypt is not a basic mountain.
It is not. The question is Blood Crypt a mountain in the graveyard with Blood Moon in play? Blood Moon only affects objects that are actually on the battlefield. Okay. Do we have any more questions on this interaction?
So Blood Moon, if I'm correct, Blood Moon creates a continuous effect on the board. When you're playing it, it first sees that self-replacement effect as it's entering, so you have to make the choice if you want to pay that 2 life.
Okay.
Then once it enters, then Blood Moon affects.
Keep in mind, though, that Blood Crypt, not actually a self-replacement effect. That is just a regular replacement effect. But basically, Blood Moon, yeah, when it's going to enter the battlefield, it takes into consideration its own replacement effects, but ignores the continuous effects of other objects that would affect it. And, question?
I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a matter of Blood Moon's affecting permanents, not cards. And until it hits the battlefield, it is not a permanent.
It is a true statement.
It's just ignoring continuous effects, and you apply that card. It doesn't even look at the game state, it's just ignoring the continuous effects of Blood Moon even existing.
Yes, correct. The Blood Moon is the effect from the Blood Moon is being ignored when considering the enters the battlefield replacement effect. You had a question?
just explaining this further, the card that a lot of people are thinking about with this is Painter Servant, where it affects not only play, but also graveyard, hand, library. And the reason it does that is because it says cards. So it applies to all cards in the game. Aside from that, where cards are mentioned, effects can only apply to stuff that is in play.
Okay, that is an excellent point. Let's really drive this situation home. Have Yixlid Jailer out. It's a creature that says cards in graveyard, lose all abilities. Scarwood Treefolk. Say it's in your graveyard. Has the ability, Scarwood Treefolk comes into play tapped. Let's say you reanimate your Scarwood Treefolk with a black general reanimation spell that puts it from the graveyard onto the battlefield. Does it come into play tapped? The correct answer is yes, it does come into play tapped. Because, like in the last example, when choosing, figuring out which replacement effects are going to apply for this, you take its replacement effect as it would exist on the battlefield and ignore the continuous effects of other objects. Question.
So if, say, Scarwood Treefolk work, say there's some other card that says creatures you control enter the battlefield tap, but it's in your, no, never mind. I'm trying to think if there's another card that Yixlid Jailer is affecting, then it would matter, because it only cares about its own replacement. That's what I'm getting.
Correct. This is about its own replacement effect. So,
The example you're looking for is humility. I know that's a terrible example, but if there was something in play that caused Scarwood
we shall have no talk about humility.
Keep in mind, not a layer's presentation.
Okay, let's try another example. Conspiracy. As conspiracy comes into play, choose a creature type. That's a replacement effect, but not one we're looking at. Creature cards you own that aren't in play, creature spells you control, and creatures you control are the chosen type. Let's say you also have out Una's Blackguard. Each rogue creature you control comes into play with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Let's say I play a Bear Cub. Bear Cub is a rogue. In my hand, it is a rogue. On the stack, it is a rogue. On the battlefield. Does it get the +1/+1 counters? No, it does not. It does not get the +1/+1 counters, because like I said, when accounting for the enters the battlefield replacement effects, it takes into account any other replacement effect that affects how it enters the battlefield, but does not take into effect any object with a static ability affecting its characteristics. So this is basically the same kind of example 3 times over. Question.
So conspiracy only, it would matter, and it still makes like Bear Cub a rogue in any other situation that might care about.
Correct.
Like how many reveal a rogue from your hand.
Correct. The comment is that conspiracy does make Bear Cub a rogue for basically any other situation that cares about it being a rogue. Yes. The situation it does not is with the entering the battlefield replacements. Now that we've gone through the most complex portion of this, there are just a couple rules that I want you to keep in mind with replacement effects. One such rule is that if you have a replacement effect that cares about such as something like the number of objects or characteristics of something in one zone as it moves to another zone, you have to keep in mind that if you have Golgari Grave Troll in the graveyard, you're going to bring it to the battlefield. That Golgari Grave Troll is either entirely in the in the graveyard or entirely on the battlefield. There is no in-between space between zones. So if you have this replacement effect, that it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard, if he comes directly from the graveyard, that replacement effect has to apply before it actually has to be able to apply before it hits the battlefield, so it will count itself from the graveyard. Any questions on that? Hey. Next slide. Let's say we have Orb of Dreams. You cast Orb of Dreams. Does it come into play tapped? It does not. Okay. This is another rule with replacement effects. This one's also a little bit tricky. Basically, if a replacement effect on an object would affect a subset of objects that includes it, but does not specifically name itself, it does not count itself for that replacement. So basically, we have Orb of Dreams that say permanents come into play tapped. It is a permanent. However, this is a replacement effect that affects a general group of objects of which it is a member. So in this situation, we have that rule saying if it affects a general group of which it is a member, but does not name itself, then it won't count itself for that coming into play replacement effect. It is just a rule in the comprehensive rules, and that is just something you've got to know. Do we have any questions on this? Yes.
Maybe this is just my way of understanding it, but I want to make sure I get it right for all situations. I thought it didn't work because it's not on the battlefield before it's entering. Like, there has to be a replacement effect out there. No, I mean on its own, but there has to be something out there before it actually enters, so that we can see it.
That is a good way of thinking about it, that the replacement effect has to be present before the thing it could apply to happens. Yes. What I explained is actually basically a line of text in the comprehensive rules. Okay, do we have any questions yet? I was expecting a whole lot more questions. Are we having fun yet? Awesome. Yes. Yes. Okay, you have a question about Panharmonicon. Hey, Panharmonicon does count itself coming into play, but that's not a replacement effect. That's a. Oh wait, hold on. Yeah, it is a replacement effect off of a triggered ability. Zach.
I guess to clarify, if you have a Dante's Aetherheart in play and you play a Panharmonicon, you get 2 or 4.
Yes, that is an excellent clarification. Okay, if you have something that cares about an artifact coming into play, and then you play or cast your artifact, when that artifact comes into play, that creature or object that cares about it will indeed trigger twice.
It's not applying to itself.
Right.
The Panharmonicon effect is not applying to Panharmonicon. It's applying to an effect triggered somewhere else because Panharmonicon came in, and that's why it applies.
Question.
Can I try and clarify it a little bit? So, specifically, Panharmonicon says if an artifact or creature entering the battlefield, Panharmonicon is an artifact, causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger. That ability triggers an additional time. If you've got a card that says whenever an artifact enters the battlefield, adds 2 energy, so triggered, it is now triggered and gone on the stack. This triggered ability went on the stack
Basically, that is an excellent way of explaining it. Basically, if you have something caring about an artifact entering the battlefield, your Panharmonicon comes onto the battlefield, that effect triggers, and the Panharmonicon is then on the battlefield to see that effect triggering, and will then trigger it again. Any other questions?
Panharmonicon only cares about
Yeah. Extort's a cast trigger, not an enter the battlefield trigger. Okay. Who's ready for the second hour of this presentation?
I'm ready for layers.
Layers will be my next presentation. But what's that?
I'll hold you to that.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
Going back a bit. So for cards that have like another continuous effect that require like card memory, for instance, going back to Blood Moon, if you play say Cavern of Souls and name something, it still maintains what you name, like say Blood Moon will be removed later, correct?
Okay, the question is, if you have Blood Moon on the field, you cast Cavern of Souls, where the replacement effect has you perform an action like naming something. Like we discussed before, you will still name that thing, even though the Cavern of Souls is going to be a basic mountain without that ability. The question is, does it remember what you named if it becomes the Cavern of Souls later? And the answer is absolutely it does. That choice is imbued within the object itself, and the object will remember it.
Because it's the same permanent.
Correct.
This is a question from the chat. Doesn't Orb of Dreams count as a generic static ability that causes a replacement effect? In that case, it doesn't affect itself because of its generic ability?
Yes, it does not affect itself because of its generic ability. That goes back to that one line in the comprehensive rules. And I know this has been kind of drawn out. It's kind of a complex, in-depth topic with a lot of stuff to it. There's a lot of stuff to remember. So, if you would like one, I summarized my entire presentation with the examples, with a basic summary of the relevant rules for the examples. If you really would like one, go ahead and start passing it around. Yes. Okay, yeah, the replace event does not actually occur, so you didn't actually draw that card for the Sylvan Library. However, having chosen to draw the card means that you have to still put cards back. Oh yeah, it does say that. So yeah, because the effect is replaced, it didn't actually happen. You're correct about that wording. No. That is over.